going to just talk a little bit here. This is the most grand of the synagogues that we'll be in. So when I give you some free time, you may want to come back and get a picture here. This is not a first century synagogue, it's a 4th century synagogue. However, it's built on the foundation of the 1st century synagogue. So that doorway is facing to Jerusalem. So they wanted to build synagogues that face Jerusalem. So that is facing south. And it didn't always, drop your mask. It didn't always face Jerusalem, but that was their preference. So we'll see some, we'll probably see another one today. But this was a very big synagogue. They've uncovered about a third of this city. And you see the Spaceship Church over there. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But I want you to listen to this. We read earlier at the top of Mount Nebo that he left Mount Nebo. What is it? Arbel, yeah. Top of Arbel, that he left Nazareth and moved here. Left Nazareth and moved here to Capernaum. Then maybe you remember this story. It's a story of the centurion's servant who was sick and about to die. Do you remember that story? Listen to Luke 7. When Jesus had finished saying all this to the people who were sitting, he entered Capernaum. That's here. There was a centurion servant whom his master valued highly. He was sick and about to die. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some of the elders of the Jews to him. So the centurion sent elders of the Jews. The centurion, what is he? Is he a Jew? Yeah, he's Roman. He sends Jewish elders to Jesus. This is interesting. Asking him to come and heal his servant. When the Jewish elders, came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him to heal his servant. Why did they do that? Why would they care about, that's the enemy. That's the Roman enemy. And the elders, man, they hated the Romans. Why did they plead with Jesus? Listen to this. This man deserves to have you do this. What? Why? He loves our nation and he built our synagogue. So Jesus helped this guy out. He's given us a lot of money. So they hate the Romans. They hate the Roman soldiers. Now a centurion in charge of 100 soldiers that the Jews are always in conflict with. They go to Jesus and beg Jesus, which, they didn't like Jesus at all. But the centurion said, I heard this guy, Jesus, I got a sick servant, help me out. And they did. It's just so interesting they did that. When we go outside, you'll hear me talk. When we walk back out, I'll have you look back. And, well, in fact, maybe we'll go that way and look together. So Jesus went with them. He was not far from the house where the centurion sent friends to him to say, Lord, don't trouble yourself. I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. Say the word, and my servant will be healed. I'm a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one go, and he goes. I tell that one come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him. He turned to the crowd and said, I tell you, I have not found such great faith even in Israel. When the men who had been sent returned to the house, they found the servant well. So that's the origin of the synagogue, on which you'll see the foundation as we walk over there, is the centurion that's in Luke 7. It's the one he paid for to be built. And then, this is Jesus' hometown. He was a traveling rabbi. So every synagogue tended in town, you had your own rabbi. But if you were a traveling rabbi, that meant you were popular, you were a good teacher, people wanted to hear you. So Jesus would constantly be invited every Sabbath to come in and teach in whatever synagogue, whatever town he was in. This was his home for 3 years. He taught in this place, in the foundation under this synagogue. How many times? So many, too many to count. But this is one of those places Jesus taught. So let's follow me this way. Let's walk around out this side. One of the primary goals in bringing you here is I want to lessen the distance between you and the world of the Bible. And the world of the Bible is separate from us by 2,000 years at least, by thousands of miles, by a totally different culture. And just coming and experiencing the world of the Bible helps us as we read the Bible. I think I talked in one of our meetings that Westerners and Easterners think differently. Westerners, when we teach, we tend to say, okay, here's the 3 things I want you to know. And we're very linear in our teaching style. Westerners tend to, you listen, and then at the end you're like, okay, I think this was the point. They move you to a place, but it's not as clear. That's how Easterners would teach. Westerners teach in very solid concepts. God is strong. He's loving. He is He is eternal. Easterners wouldn't say that. They just wouldn't say that. They would say God is a rock. God is a fortress. God is a shepherd. They give word pictures, they don't give the words. They give the word picture that helps you understand the words. Does that make sense? That's why Jesus is constantly teaching in parables, because he's teaching the way that culture communicated. Okay, so when you guys went into the cave, did you go to the millstone in the cave? Did he take you to the cave with the millstone in it that had one of these right here? In where you ate lunch, where you ate pizza the first day?
No.
No? Okay. All right. So this is a millstone that would be used as this is an olive press. And by the way, olive press, here's the word for it. Gethsemane is olive press. You know the word Gethsemane. You've heard of the phrase Garden of Gethsemane. I guess you'd say Garden of Olive Press. But by the way, the phrase Garden of Gethsemane is never found in the Bible. We did that. The Bible didn't do that. We did that. The Bible just says garden or grove. What kind of grove would be on the Mount of Olives? A grove of olive trees, yeah. Or it says Gethsemane, olive press. But what you'd do is you'd put olives in that where you see the still water. You'd fill it with olives. There would be some might be able to see the middle hole, and you would connect it, and then either by man or animal, usually animal, in the cave that you were nearby, it was done by hand. But you'd put an animal onto that, and they would just walk around, and it would crush those olives. And you could see that's so heavy. It would have, and then out of it you'd get the olive oil, and then they'd take it out of there. They obviously would have a bunch of oil that they would have, but then they would take the olives, they would put them usually in some kind of bag, and then there's a second piece of it. Here they would use that tall white stone, and they would have a way to leverage it up, and they'd put these bags of olives under there and smash it one more time. And you could see on this side there's a little trough. The oil would come out and run down, and then that was you'd have olive oil. And this was a huge industry here, because olive oil was used for everything. It was used for cooking. It was used in, our driver drinks a glass of it every morning. Do you see him? He pours olive oil in a glass and he just drinks it every morning, every meal. But it was used for burning lamps, not the virgin olive oil, some of the leftovers. Olive oil was used everywhere. And by the way, the basalt rock that we see, that is found, it's in this area a lot. And what's interesting is there was a high number of Gethsemanes, of oil presses found here when they did archaeology. There is, and also you'll find basalt olive presses throughout the country where there's not basalt stone. In other words, they think this was like a place that manufactured the olive presses for people. So it's interesting then when you get to Matthew 18, and this is where that world of the Bible comes a little closer to our world. In Matthew 18, let me read you the first 6 verses. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called a little child to him, placed the child among them, and said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. If anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and be drowned into the depths of the sea." I haven't read this passage hundreds of times in my life. And it was the first time that I stood here years ago, over a decade ago, reading that passage and looking at these millstones, which is the round circle you see on the ground there inside the olive press. That's a millstone. And Jesus is, can you imagine it? Jesus is standing where he could see the Sea of Galilee. He's standing in perhaps what is a production factory for millstones. And he is saying, if you harm a little child, I'm telling you, it would be better for you to take one of these millstones. You know what? I don't know what I thought a millstone was. I didn't imagine that. And it would be better for you to tie a rope through the hole of that millstone, tie the other end of the rope into your neck, float out into the middle of the Sea of Galilee, and drop that stone overboard, than to do something offensive to a child. That is a vivid, vivid picture of how seriously Jesus takes the protection of children and not causing harm to a child. And it was, again, it's Eastern thinking. So you use what's in front of you to illustrate something. And he's standing in what likely is a factory of millstones and is able to say, here's what you ought to do. That's how serious it is. It's powerful. And one of my goals on a trip like this is for you to look at the Bible when you read it, to have a different picture in your, I don't know why, but I just imagine some kind of rock and some rope tied around it, and which is bad enough, but you're not going to win with that. You know, how heavy is can I swim against that? No, you're not going to win against that. If you're tied to that around your neck, you're not going to win. And that the vividness of that is intentional, and it's powerful, that Jesus gave us about how much he cares for and loves innocent children. It's why we have to, as a church, as a people, as a family, take the protection of children seriously. Not just physically, very important physically too, but protecting their hearts in a difficult culture in which we live. Okay, let me walk around, and we'll follow me to a special room. And very early in church history, it began to be known as the home of Simon Peter, and that's where Jesus came to heal Peter's mother-in-law. Did Jesus stay there? Most homes had a guest house, in the guest room. Would Jesus have lived there? We don't know. But very quickly, and then the church began to expand. And you could read more about, okay, here's what they found in the 3rd century and then the 5th century, and it just enlarged. So one of the things when I give you free time is, although usually there's crowds here usually, so this is actually a good spot, but also in the middle of the church it's a glass floor in the very middle, and you can kind of look down into it. So, but I can't do any talking from up there, but yeah, you'll be able to go in there. Listen to this. And the most logical reason that this would have turned so quickly into a place of worship is if it's correctly Peter's house. Listen to Mark chapter 1. As soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. There's the synagogue, here's the house. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever. They immediately told Jesus about her, so she went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them. That evening after sunset, people brought to Jesus all the sick, the demon-possessed. The whole town gathered at the door. Jesus healed many who had various diseases, drove out demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. Chapter 2. This is Mark 2. A few days later, when Jesus entered again Capernaum, the people heard he had come home. They gathered in such large numbers there was no room left, not even outside the door, and he preached the word to them. Some men came, bringing to him a paralyzed man, carried by 4 of them. Since they could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus by digging through it, and lowering the mat the man was lying on. Jesus saw their faith. He said to the paralyzed man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." By the time it got to the 4th century, they reinforced the walls. There was a pilgrim in the late 300s who said, there's a quote from him, she said this, Agiria said, "Moreover, in Capernaum, the house of the Prince of the Apostles has been made into a church, with its original walls still standing. It is where the Lord healed the paralytic." And then in the 5th century, it got larger. So it was about the 3rd century they identified it. It's not guaranteed, but it's a good sign by what they found. The way there was Jesus Christ is Lord on the walls, the plaster, that it wasn't used for any normal sense, that it could be Peter's house. It's just interesting to think about all the stories we've read about Peter, maybe where he and his brother lived. Although, again, you can see the normal rooms the circle's not normal. That's going to be the church part. That's what they made it into a church. More rectangle square rooms would be the norm. Okay, but when you get a chance, you can come down here and take pictures up there. I have one more spot I want to show you. We're going to walk down to the shore.
Hey David, could I ask something?
Yeah, please, that'd be great.
Just about the church. So the churches here, that the square around is from the 4th century. It's actually older than this octagonal church. You see, octagonal churches, they're built around something. So I like what David said here about possibly Peter's house, but I like to refer to this as the oldest church in the world. because apparently they were already marked this as a place of worship. One other thing I want to talk about, Capernaum in the rabbinical literature talks about it being full of sex. And I had a professor that wrote, a Jewish religious professor wrote this on the wall like this, SECTS, as in they were Jews who believed in Jesus, what we call Jewish believers. And there are some other stories about that, but this city was known as being full of followers of Jesus. At least for the first few hundred years after Jesus.
We could spend a long time just reading story after story after story that happened in this town, or as Jesus came to this town, or when he left this town. Think of the Gospels this way. There's 89 chapters in the Gospels in total, and only 4 of them are about the birth of Jesus. 31 of them are about the trial, death, resurrection, ascension of Jesus. So it's about a third of the Gospels are about that last week of the life of Jesus and after. Only 4 chapters about his birth, and then the story of his when he's 12 years old. So almost 2/3 of the Gospels are about 3 years that he lived here. So a majority of the Gospels are from here, from this place. So let me just remind you of some of the stories. I'll just start reading some of them, allow you I'll mention the scriptures in case you're writing them down. John chapter 4, this is verses 46 through 54. This is the story of Jesus in Cana of Galilee. We were there looking, we drove by it when we were sitting in Zephyrus. It was just over the hill. Once more, this is verses 46, starting at verse 46. Once more he visited Cana in Galilee where he had turned water into wine. So this is another visit to Cana. There was a certain royal official whose son lay sick at Capernaum. So he's there, 13, 15 miles away. And the son lay sick here. When the man heard, I thought we were moving away from the tractor, but it came to us. When the man heard Jesus had arrived in Galilee from Judea, he went to him and begged him to come and heal his son who was close to death. The royal official said, "Sir, come down before my child dies." Go. And by the way, come down. You may feel that differently. Remember how we drove down the hills from where we were to get to the Sea of Galilee. The royal official said, "Sir, come down before my child dies." "Go," Jesus replied, "your son will live." The man took Jesus at his word. While he was still on the way, his servants met him with the news the young boy was living. When he inquired as to the time, as the son got better, they said to him, "Yesterday at 1 p.m, the fever left him." When the father realized this was the exact time Jesus had said to come to him, "Your son will live." So he and his whole household believed, believers here in Capernaum. In Mark 1, they came to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus went into the synagogue and began to teach. The synagogue, right over the Spaceship Church. Like we got some music behind us too. The people were amazed at his teaching because he taught them as one who had authority, not as their teachers of the law. Just then, a man in their synagogue who was possessed by an impure spirit cried out, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." "Be quiet," Jesus said. "Come out of him." The impure spirit shook the man violently and came out of him with a shriek. The people were also amazed. They asked each other, "What is this? A new teaching and with authority, even gives orders to impure spirits, and they obey him." News about him spread quickly over the whole region of Galilee. Of course, we already read the start of the story in Mark 2, where they cut a hole in the roof. So many miracles. Another chapter, I think I mentioned chapters 8 and 9 of Matthew. Chapter 11 would be a good one. Just listen to this, because here's city 1 out of 3. Listen carefully. This is the third city he mentions. Matthew 11:23. "And you, Capernaum, will you be lifted up to the heavens? No, you will go down to Hades. For if the miracles that were performed in you had been performed in Sodom, it would have remained to this day." You know how wicked Sodom and Gomorrah was. "But I tell you, it will be more bearable for Sodom on the day of judgment than for you. Is Jesus saying that the wicked actions of Capernaum were worse than the wicked actions of Sodom and Gomorrah? What's the problem? Why were it
Unbelief.
better for Sodom?
They didn't know
What's that?
Jesus.
Unbelief.
Unbelief. What's that?
They didn't know Jesus.
Yeah, there's more revelation here. To whom much is given, much is required. And so to disbelieve in Sodom and Gomorrah, very serious. To disbelieve in Capernaum when Jesus is there, deadly serious. All of this happened close to here. Small town, massive events. This is where Jesus healed, loved, lived, made friends, and made enemies. But he tried to keep a little bit of a low profile. It's pretty hard when you're healing people. Pretty hard when you're casting out demons. News spread about him everywhere. It brought religious leaders all the way from Jerusalem, 100 miles away, to come up and see. But this is the town in which it happened. I want us to sing another song here. Now that we're gathered up, we're going to sing the very last one, Yet Not I, but Christ in Me. Let's sing that together.